Flag laws, there's due process involved, of course, and any red flag law that's been passed. Florida passed this law. Nobody is going to take away anyone's right to own a firearm without evidence brought to the court and a judge saying that there is enough evidence. Somebody could be saying text that they're going to shoot up a school. Somebody could have multiple calls into 911 with threats to people. So there has got to be evidence before someone would, if we had a red flag law in place, before guns would be taken away. Also, when those guns are taken away with the red flag law, it's temporary. It's 1 year, 2 years, it's whatever the legislature decides to write. And then those people can petition to have their guns back again. So we heard this bill. I know we heard in 2017 the NRA and the Texas State Rifle Association were against it. They kind of called the shots on that, and it never went anywhere. But I believe I hope that it gets a hearing again next session. I hope we can talk about it. I think it would be a big step forward in terms of solution, along with universal background checks, because as Mr. Patterson said, yes, most background checks are through federally licensed dealers, but 20% of all sales are through these private sellers. That's the estimate, whether it be at gun shows or in our community. That means 20% of guns are being sold to people that we have no idea if they would pass a background check or not. That's dangerous. And so we can do something now if we decide to act. I appreciate Donna Howard saying, let's call a special session. I know you're saying it's unlikely. We just saw the Senate come to an agreement today. Mitch McConnell said something positive on a press release today. Who thought that could have happened? If that can happen, we can make things happen in this city, in this state, if Greg Abbott wanted it to happen. We just have to have the courage to do it.
Jerry, I want to turn to you and then Representative Howard as well. Just some of those things that you mentioned, Andrea. In recent years, Texas has been loosening its laws around guns. Do you think any of those things that she listed are feasible, even if there is the public support for it?
Well, I read Andrea's list here, and it's some things in there I agree with there, without any difficulty. Some things I think, okay, maybe we could do that. Maybe it's constitutional, but will it really make a difference at the end of the day? And one of the problems we have whenever these things happen is people start throwing their cliches on both sides that really, if that cliche became law, would make no difference. But going back to the red flag law, the problem with the red flag law is that initial confiscation of firearm is an ex parte action. Am I right there, Counselor?
Yes.
Yeah. So in other words, when the judge gives the authority to confiscate the firearms, the person who owns those firearms is not present at that hearing. But then my response to that is that all search warrants, which are legal with judicial order in Texas, are also ex parte. So in other words, can we create a red flag, call it what you want, where due process, appeal, a mandatory appeal, and a criminal penalty for somebody that makes a false complaint, like you got an angry former spouse or whatever. I think it can be done, and I'm one who believes that all the other stuff about gun show loopholes and weapons of war, all of that is BS. The thing we can do, and these shooters have telegraphed. Many of these shooters have telegraphed ahead of time, weeks, months ahead of time. So it's out there. So how can we take that weapon away from that kid in a manner that is constitutional?
Representative Howard, did you have any thoughts on legislative possibilities in the next session, unless if there is a special that's called?
Well, I think one thing I have to remind everybody of, and it's been alluded to a certain extent, is that we did last session, I didn't support it, but we passed permitless carry. So we actually have a situation now that some of the things we're talking about don't actually apply. If one can get access to a gun and they're readily available, they do not have to have a permit to carry. There's no background check. There's no nothing. They are allowed to have a gun in their possession. So I think we've got a whole new world here that we're talking about, as opposed to what happened when Jerry Patterson set the stage for the concealed carry. It's very different now with permitless carry. I don't know what we're going to be able to do next session, but I think that we've got to look at what can we do to allow law-abiding citizens to access the guns that they want to have, but at the same time ensure that those that shouldn't have access to those guns, that would be doing harm to themselves or others, have impediments in place that prevent them from getting that. And the permitless carry part is a confounding factor now. The fact that we don't have the background checks and private sales is a factor. You know, we have talked some about the safe storage legislation that wasn't legislation, I'm sorry. We were not able to pass legislation. Michael Cargill, thank you very much. He came forward to support that, as just about everybody else did. All law enforcement, veterans associations, all the groups supported it except for one, and we couldn't even get a vote on the House floor. But we were able to get money into the budget that allowed DPS to create this safe storage campaign to ensure that at least we got information out to folks about what they should be doing. And again, with permitless carry, you're not even getting the information about the need for safe storage because you're not getting the training that people like Michael Cargill provide. You're just able to get a gun and carry it without having had any instruction, training, anything about storage. And we know now that the CDC has indicated that firearm deaths are the leading cause of death of children and youth in our state. The leading cause of death, surpassing automobile accidents. And access to unsafely stored and secured firearms is one of the primary reasons that that happens. So we have a lot to talk about here. And I hope that when the legislature does convene, if we have to wait till next January, great, but I would love to see a special session where we can have these debates. I realize the politics of it, Jerry, and that we do have an election coming up, and I know that politics sometimes gets in the way of implementing policy. But this is a policy, these are policies that are going to save Texas lives, and we need to do something about it now.
One of the aspects of the federal package is incentivizing states. I was going to go to you, Edwin. Is incentivizing states to have their own red flag laws, if you will. They did not call it red flag laws. It has different names in various states. But Edwin, I'm curious. You know, talking about what's already existing in Texas code, what more would you see possibly being an openness for that if there's incentives?
Well, the reason that the red flag laws have been opposed, the ones that have been proposed in prior legislative sessions, is just the ambiguities that are present in the statute. For example, right now, you know, the police are required to observe conduct, and keep in mind that's in our history of jurisprudence. It's very important that we penalize conduct. We penalize bad conduct. We don't penalize thoughts. We're not the thought police. We look to see conduct that is dangerous. And so right now the police observe conduct that they believe either, you know, is evidence of a mental disorder or is is actually dangerous in its use. But the red flag laws, as they've been proposed, just allows somebody to go get a protective order, go get one of these emergency risk, extreme risk protective orders based upon dangerousness. And there's no definition of dangerousness. There's no limitation on dangerousness. There's no qualification of dangerousness. And it allows anybody who is a member of somebody's family or a member of somebody's household or former member of somebody's family or household, and that's just too broad of a category of individuals.
Do you think there's room for abuse with that broad of a category?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I have some experience practicing family law, and they don't call family courts the palace of perjury for no reason. It's absolutely, and just think about a former roommates who get crossways with each other. One roommate kicks out the other one. Guess what? I'm going to the police. I'm going to tell you, you used to wave your guns around all the time. And I'm going to swear out an affidavit, and they're going to come in the middle of the night. In fact, in Maryland, that's exactly what happened. A man was shot to death because the police obtained an ex parte order, showed up at his house at 5 a.m. in the morning and said, "We're taking your guns." And he's like, what, wait a minute? And they shot him to get his guns. So this is an avenue for abuse. If you, like I said, I think Chapter 573 can cover everybody who is truly dangerous.
Is that the Family Code, 573?
The Health and Safety Code. And so I believe that this already exists. Now, with some of the other issues that's been raised, with regard to, and a lot of people throw out these statistics. Well, everybody supports red flag laws. Everybody supports universal background checks. Well, that's not true. We have background checks. The only transaction that is not covered by a background check under federal law is a person-to-person, non-commercial transfer of a firearm between residents of the same state. So if you have a private transaction across state lines, illegal under federal law. You have a private person who's acting as an unlicensed dealer, illegal under federal law. Okay, and the reason that the federal law doesn't cover these person-to-person transactions is because of the Commerce Code, because Congress doesn't have the authority to regulate non-commercial transactions. If somebody's selling guns to either make a profit or as a business endeavor, already illegal under federal law. And does anybody really believe that the guy who's buying a stolen gun out of the trunk of a car on a back alley is going to be deterred by the fact that they have to go spend $70 at their local FFL to get a background check? No, that will not stop a single one of those transactions that actually put guns into the hands of known criminals.
Andrea, I'll give you the mic kind of or do you want to pass it over to Andrea real quick? Jumping off of what he said, you hear that argument a lot of, well, this isn't going to stop the bad guys. What's your take?
Why have any laws then? Why have laws against theft? Why don't we let anyone have a machine gun? If criminals aren't going to obey laws, why have any laws in place? I disagree with that. We tighten our laws, and we will be stronger and have fewer people that shouldn't have guns having guns. A state straw purchase law. I've got a list of things that we could do. It's just not accurate that these things won't make a difference. States with stronger gun laws have fewer gun deaths, period. That's been studied. It's been reported on. That is accurate. Also, the red flag laws, it can be written any way we want it to be. We can have assurances. We can have penalties against someone that comes and lies. Whatever's in our current law now, it does not give friends and family an option to come forward now. And yes, it can be abused, but it can also save lives. And it's been proven to save lives in Florida, where it was passed, in California, where it was passed. There's people that are dangerous, and people are crying out for help. We have someone that's well known, that's been an advocate in our state, that came to the police and said, my son has schizophrenia. He's stockpiling weapons. I don't think he should have them. What can I do? And the police said, sorry, ma'am, nothing I can do. He shot her husband a year later. Why couldn't she get some help? Why couldn't she get some help? Why can't we try to keep guns out of the hands of people that should not have them?
Nick, if you wanted to say something, I heard you raise a important counter argument. I hear a lot. You said not in Chicago.
Well, Chicago has, from what I understand, the strictest gun laws in the country, or one of the
I believe
cities.
California might be number one.
Okay, so they're the second strictest, and they have the highest gun violence in the country, as far as I know statistically. So you can't say that gun laws are a direct result of lower gun violence, because Chicago's proof that it's exactly the opposite. Secondly, if you have laws, they don't mean anything to people who don't abide by them. So that argument goes right out the window, because criminals don't care about laws. The guy who shot my brother was not supposed to have a gun. He was 19 years old. He stole a gun. I don't want to go into the details of the aspect of that, but basically it was not a legally acquired gun. It wasn't bought at a gun show. It was a stolen gun, and he shot my brother with it. They also, the same group of kids that came from Killeen, also had anywhere from 10 to 14 other firearms. So all these firearms were illegally obtained by one way or another, whether it was theft or back alley purchases. But none of these laws would have stopped what happened on 6th Street that night. The only thing that would have stopped it is a week before, the man who shot my brother shot somebody else, and they're not being prosecuted. They're being caught and released, and they're going right back out. They're getting another illegal gun, or they're breaking into someone's house or car. They're stealing another gun. They're going right back out and doing the same thing.
So you see it as an enforcement problem?
I see it as an enforcement problem, not at the police level, because the police are arresting them. All the police officers can do is their job, which is go out, find the bad guy, bring him into process him, and then it's the district attorney's job to move forward with the charges. And instead of moving forward with the charges, they're dropping the ball. I just heard a story this year, a few months ago. 2 men got into a fight. A guy came up behind the one man who was winning the fight, tried to shoot him in the back of the head point blank. Luckily, he missed. He was brought up on charges, brought to the district attorney of Austin, and he was released on unlawful discharge of a firearm. Not attempted murder, not possession of a weapon that was an illegal weapon. He was just let go, and basically he has a court appearance. But he's back out on 6th Street. I'm sure he was there this weekend. So the problem is enforcement. And as far as schools go, I mean, I hate to say this because you don't want anybody to lose their lives, but you know, had there been an armed guard or an armed officer at that school that took place, you know, that school shooting that took place here in Texas, maybe that kid could have been stopped before he killed the other kids. I mean, it's sad to say that you'd rather have a kid shot before he gets into a school to murder other kids, but it's better 1 than 19, I would argue anyway. And shame on the parents and whoever he got that gun from. I don't know, I believe he purchased that one
Purchased
legally.
it legally.
But there are other cases where they steal their parents' guns, and the parents should be held accountable for that. And if there's a gun stolen from you, if it's your gun that gets stolen out of your car or your gun safe or your home, you should be accountable for some of the violence that your gun has produced based on the fact that you left it available for a criminal to get.
Well, and I'm sure as our lawmakers in the room understand, you can't legislate parenting, which is, you know, a lot. There's a lot to be said about that. Andrea, you look like you have something you wanted to say.
Yeah, just a fact here on Illinois. We have a higher gun death rate than Illinois. We have 4.2 per 100,000. Illinois is 14.2 per 100,000. Illinois is 14.1 per 100,000. So we have a lot of big cities in this state. I know people will talk about Chicago. I get you. But as a state, if we're talking state solutions, Illinois has fewer per capita. So the research does show that states with stronger gun laws in general do have lower gun death rates.
California has, I just did a report on this, California has the strictest gun laws in the country, and its per capita gun rate is 8.5 per 100,000 people. The national average is 13.7, just to give you an idea of what the numbers are. Go ahead, Jerry.
You know, and there's some merit to what you say, but you know, if all these gun laws would make us safer, Mexico has every single law that you seek, and it has a firearms death rate, I think homicide rate, about 9 times what the U.S. has. There's only one gun store in Mexico you can buy a firearm. It's in Mexico City. It's run by the Mexican Army. Now, they will say, well, that's because Texas has so many guns and they're coming across the border. Well, if that were the case, we've got the proliferation of guns compared to Mexico. We would have a higher firearms homicide rate. So, yes, the answer is yes and no. I mean, you can't categorically say that more laws make us safer, and you can't categorically say that certain laws won't make us safer. I wish it was simple.
I hear you, but I will say, pushing back on that the background checks, that our system is just fine now, and because we require them out of other states, there's a heck of a lot of selling going on within Texas over the internet. Go on, I think it's guntrader.com, something like that. People are selling guns over the internet all the time, and they're not federally licensed dealers.
I have to tell you, those gunbroker.com, I go to that, and I look at that. Those transactions go to a dealer, and an FFL check is an FFL dealer, and the check is made. They will not ship person to person.
Within Texas.